My mom paid for my entire wedding without telling me, and I found out 3 days before I was supposed to propose a toast to the woman I loved. She'd paid for the venue, the catering, the photographer, the flowers, the DJ, everything Laura told me her family had covered. My mom thought she could buy her way back into my life after 20 years of choosing someone else's family over mine. She was wrong. By the time I was done making phone calls, every single vendor had either refunded her card or transferred the contract to my name, and my fiancée was standing outside my dad's house in the dark, screaming at a closed door. Some people call that overreacting. I call it the only language they left me with. To understand why I did what I did, you need to go back to when I was 13 years old. My mom had an affair. She left my dad for a man named Jeff, and at first, things were manageable. My brother and I visited every weekend. She seemed present, attentive, like she was trying. I didn't like Jeff, but I was 13 and I told myself that was just how it felt when your family broke apart. Then she got pregnant with Jeff's daughter, and the visits started thinning out. She'd miss my school recitals. She'd miss my brother's competitions. There was always a reason, always something with the new baby, always something with Jeff's schedule, always something that wasn't us. I watched it happen slowly enough that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it, and then one day it happened all at once. I was 16 when Jeff got a job offer out of state. My brother and I begged her not to go. I remember sitting at her kitchen table and actually begging, which is not something I'm proud of, but I was 16 and she was my mother and I still believed that mattered enough. She looked at me across that table and said, "I need to prioritize my family." I didn't say anything back. I didn't cry. I just sat there and understood, for the first time with complete clarity, that she was not talking about me when she said the word family. That was the last real conversation we had. I went no contact that same week, and I never looked back. My brother handled it differently. He stayed in touch, kept the relationship going, found a way to compartmentalize that I never could. I respected his choice and he respected mine, mostly. My mom tried for years to get through to me. Phone calls I didn't answer. Showing up at the house when I was in high school, standing on the porch while my dad told her I didn't want to come down. Sending relatives to deliver messages, to guilt me, to explain her side of things. I didn't go to my own high school graduation ceremony because she'd found out about it and said she was coming. I skipped my college graduation for the same reason. I even missed my brother's wedding, which is the one I still carry some guilt about, because she was going to be there and I wasn't willing to be in the same room. I made my choices and I lived with them, and for 17 years, the arrangement held. Then 3 months ago, she moved back. Jeff retired, or the job ended, or something shifted, and suddenly she was back in our hometown with her whole rebuilt family in tow. And the moment she arrived, the pressure started. My half-siblings, who I had never met and had no relationship with, started messaging me on social media. Long messages about what a wonderful mother she was, how much she'd changed, how I was missing out on a family that wanted me. I blocked them. Then Jeff called me directly. He told me I was pathetic. He told me I needed therapy. He said I was punishing my mother for a decision she made when I was a child, and that I needed to grow up. I told him he was a home-wrecking man-whore and blocked him too, which I'll admit was not my most measured moment, but I stand by the sentiment. What I didn't anticipate was what happened next. The people in my own life started turning. My dad, who had watched my mom walk out on our family, started telling me I was being too hard on her. My brother, who knew everything, started saying she'd changed and that I should at least hear her out. My grandparents called. My aunts and uncles weighed in. Even friends who had no real stake in it started offering opinions I hadn't asked for. The consensus was that I was being unreasonable, that she'd tried her best, that I was the one pushing her away. I heard it from enough directions that I started to feel like I was living in a different reality from everyone around me, like I was the only person who remembered what actually happened. And then Laura started saying it too. Laura was my fiancée. We'd been together 4 years and engaged for 8 months. I had told her everything about my mother, the affair, the move, the years of silence. She knew the full history. So when she started echoing the same talking points as everyone else, I noticed. I asked her about it and she said she'd just been thinking about it, that she wanted me to be happy, that holding on to this much anger wasn't healthy. I let it go the first time. The second time, I pushed back a little. The third time, she said something that I haven't been able to unhear since. She said, "Everyone can see the truth but you. Look in the mirror. You're the problem." I asked her why she wouldn't support me on this. She said she loved me but she wouldn't stand by and watch me be a heartless bastard to a woman who was clearly trying to make things right. I told her not to marry one then, and I walked out of the apartment. I drove around for about an hour before I went back, and when I got there, I started thinking about the pattern. The same phrases. The same framing. The same timing. Everyone in my life suddenly shifting their position at the exact same moment my mother moved back to town. That didn't happen by accident. So I started digging. It took me about 2 days to find the thread. Laura's mother and my mother had been in contact for months, long before the move. They were in the same online community, some local neighborhood group, and they'd been messaging privately. Laura's mom had been feeding her a version of events, and Laura had been absorbing it without telling me. That was bad enough. But then I found something else, and that's when the whole thing cracked open. I was going through our wedding folder, the shared document where Laura and I had tracked all the vendor contracts and payments. I'd been meaning to update the catering deposit, and I noticed the payment confirmation had a name on it I didn't recognize. I looked closer. It was a card registered to my mother's address. I checked the venue. Same card. The photographer. The florist. The DJ. Every single line item that Laura had told me her family was covering had been paid for by my mother. Not partially. Entirely. My mother had secretly funded our entire wedding, and Laura had known, and neither of them had said a word to me. I sat with that for about 20 minutes. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send any messages. I just sat there and thought about what it meant. My mother had decided that if she couldn't get back into my life through pressure or guilt or family intervention, she would buy her way in. She would pay for the wedding, show up as a guest, and I would be standing at the altar surrounded by her money without ever having agreed to it. She would have a seat at the most important day of my life because she'd purchased one. And Laura had let her. Laura had taken the money, kept the secret, and then stood in our apartment and told me I was the problem. I picked up the phone and started calling vendors. I went through every single one. I explained the situation calmly, that someone had made payments on my behalf without my knowledge or consent, and that I needed the contracts transferred to my name or the payments refunded. I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't emotional. I just stated the facts and asked what they could do. The responses were better than I expected. The photographer said it was manipulative and that they'd work with me on a payment plan. The venue said they'd honor my original deposit and let me pay the difference over 6 months. The baker canceled my mother's order entirely and offered to make the cake at cost. By the end of the day, every vendor had either refunded her card or switched the contract to my name. My mother had zero financial leverage over my wedding. It had taken about 6 hours. Then I called Laura's mother. I was calm, almost eerily calm, which I think surprised her. I said, "Hi. I'm calling to let you know I'm postponing the wedding indefinitely. Your daughter and my mother have both been lying to me for months, and I don't start a marriage built on lies and manipulation. You can tell them both I said that. Have a good day." She tried to argue. She said I was being dramatic, that my mother just wanted to help, that I was throwing away my future over pride. I said, "I'm not discussing this," and I hung up. Laura showed up at my dad's house that night. She was crying and knocking on the door, and when my dad opened it, he looked at me. I shook my head. He told her to leave. She stood outside for about 20 minutes, and I could hear her through the window, saying I was ruining everything, that she'd done nothing wrong, that my mother had only been trying to help. My phone went off for hours after that. Laura, her mother, her friends, a few of my relatives, all variations of the same message. I had overreacted, my mother had good intentions, I was throwing away my future over pride. I read every message and responded to none of them. Here's what none of them seemed to understand. This was never just about the money. The money was the proof. It was the physical evidence of a plan that had been running for months without my knowledge, involving my fiancée, my future mother-in-law, and a woman I had spent 20 years keeping out of my life for reasons that were entirely valid. The money told me that my mother hadn't changed. She'd just gotten more sophisticated. Instead of showing up on the porch or sending relatives to guilt me, she'd found a way to insert herself into the architecture of my future without asking permission. And Laura had handed her the blueprints. The subplot that nobody talks about in these situations is what happens to the people who stayed neutral. My brother called me the day after I postponed the wedding. He didn't take sides. He just asked if I was okay, and I told him honestly that I didn't know yet. He said he understood why I'd done what I did, even if he wouldn't have done it the same way. That meant something. My dad was quieter than usual for a few days, and then he told me he was sorry he'd pushed me to reconcile with her. He said he hadn't known about the wedding payments and that if he had, he would have told me. I believed him. Not everyone who got it wrong was acting in bad faith. Some of them were just working with incomplete information, and that's a different thing. My grandmother called me a week later. She was the one who had been most vocal about me forgiving my mother, the one who had said the most cutting things about my choices over the years. She called to tell me she'd found out about the wedding payments from my aunt, who had heard it from someone at the venue. She didn't apologize exactly, but she said, I didn't know she'd gone that far. I told her I appreciated the call. I didn't say anything else, because there wasn't anything else to say. She'd spent years telling me I was wrong, and now she had new information, and what she did with it was her business. Laura and I have not spoken since that night. I don't know what she told people about why the wedding was postponed, and I haven't tried to find out. What I know is that she made a choice, a sustained choice over months, to take money from a woman she knew I had cut off, to keep it secret, and then to stand in front of me and tell me I was the one with the problem. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. And it told me everything I needed to know about what our marriage would have looked like. My mother sent me a letter about 2 weeks after everything fell apart. Handwritten, several pages. I didn't read past the first paragraph, which said she had only wanted to give us a beautiful wedding and that she hoped I could find it in my heart to understand. I put it in an envelope, wrote return to sender on the front, and mailed it back. I didn't add anything. I didn't need to. The vendors had already said everything that needed saying. Some people in my life still think I went too far. They think I should have had a conversation, given her a chance to explain, found some middle ground. And I understand why that sounds reasonable from the outside. But here's what I know from the inside. My mother has had 20 years to find middle ground. She had every opportunity to reach out in a way that respected my boundaries, that acknowledged what she'd done, that asked instead of assumed. Instead, she found a back door. She found my fiancé, made friends with her mother, and quietly funded a wedding I didn't know she was paying for. All so she could show up on the day I said I do and call it a reconciliation. That's not love. That's a strategy. And I'm done being the target of it. The wedding folder is still on my laptop. I haven't deleted it. I updated the vendor contacts to my name and my name only, and I left the rest of it there as a reminder of what it cost to find out who was actually in my corner. When I do get married, whenever that is and to whoever that turns out to be, every person in that room will be there because I chose them. Not because someone bought them a seat. That's the only kind of wedding I'm interested in having.